Ambassador Thomas Reed stood before the mirror in his quarters aboard the Vaxarian diplomatic station, adjusting his perfectly pressed uniform for the 5th time. The first official meeting between humanity and the Vaxarians was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes, and everything had to be perfect. Earth's future might depend on it. The station's artificial gravity felt slightly off, making his movements seem awkward and unfamiliar. Or perhaps it was just his nerves. The preliminary reports about the Vaxarians described them as a highly advanced reptilian species with strict social hierarchies and complex beauty standards. Their technological achievements had far surpassed humanity's, making them valuable potential allies. When Thomas entered the conference room, he was immediately struck by the Vaxarians' appearance. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors with each movement. Their elongated faces featured sharp, symmetrical ridges and large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to capture every detail of their surroundings. The lead Vaxarian diplomat, first speaker Zewextal, approached Thomas with fluid grace. However, as they drew closer, Thomas noticed something unsettling. The alien's face twitched slightly, their upper scales rippling in what he would later learn was an expression of distaste. "Welcome, Ambassador Reed," Zewextal said through the translation device, their voice carefully neutral despite their obvious discomfort. "We trust your journey was acceptable." Throughout the meeting, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Vaxarian seemed to avoid looking directly at his face, instead focusing on his hands or the space just above his head. When he spoke, several of them would shift their scales in that same rippling pattern he'd noticed earlier. It wasn't until his assistant, Olivia Martinez, passed him a message on her tablet that he understood: "They think we're hideous." Their beauty standards involve symmetrical scale patterns and rigid geometric features. Our soft, malleable faces disgust them. Thomas felt his heart sink. How could they build meaningful diplomatic relations if the very sight of humans repulsed their potential allies? The meeting continued with increasing tension, the Vaxarians maintaining rigid politeness while clearly struggling to hide their distaste. That evening, frustrated and needing to clear his head, Thomas headed to the station's adaptation chamber, a gym-like facility designed to help visitors adjust to the station's gravity. He'd been given permission to use it during off hours, when no Vaxarians would typically be present. Stripping off his uniform jacket and shirt, Thomas began his usual workout routine. The strange gravity made every movement a challenge, but he welcomed the distraction. He was halfway through a set of modified pull-ups when the chamber's door hissed open. First speaker Zewextal stood in the doorway, accompanied by 2 other Vaxarian officials. They had presumably come to discuss some urgent matter, but all 3 froze at the sight before them. Their scales shifted through a rapid sequence of colors, and their breathing patterns changed noticeably. "Ambassador," Zewextal said, their voice carrying an entirely different tone than earlier. "We were unaware that humans possessed such definition in their physical form." Thomas dropped from the pull-up bar, suddenly self-conscious about his bare chest and the muscle definition that years of military service and regular exercise had given him. But the Vaxarians weren't showing disgust now, quite the opposite. They seemed fascinated. "The symmetry of your muscular structure," one of the other officials said, stepping forward. "The geometric patterns created by your physical exertion. This is unexpected." In that moment, Thomas realized they'd just stumbled upon something that might change everything. The Vaxarians hadn't been repulsed by all human features, just the ones they'd seen. Perhaps this accidental revelation could bridge the gap between their species in ways that formal diplomacy couldn't. He grabbed his towel, hiding a smile. Tomorrow's meetings would be very interesting indeed. News of the gym incident spread through the Vaxarian diplomatic station faster than a quantum transmission. Within days, the initial group of human diplomats was joined by a carefully selected cultural exchange team, and the Vaxarians' reaction to them was nothing short of revolutionary. Lieutenant Sophia Williams, the Earth Delegation security chief, found herself at the center of unexpected attention during her morning workout routine. Her regular training sessions in the adaptation chamber now drew crowds of Vaxarian observers, their scales shimmering with fascination as they watched her move through various exercises. "The dynamic symmetry of human musculature is absolutely fascinating," declared Professor Nexthar, the Vaxarian's leading xenobiologist, as he documented Sophia's training routine. "The way their bodies adapt and reshape themselves through physical exertion, it's like watching living architecture." The professor's enthusiasm led to the first official joint human-Vaxarian physical training study. However, things didn't quite go as planned. The Vaxarians, with their naturally rigid skeletal structure, struggled with many basic human exercises. Their first attempt at yoga led to a diplomatic incident when senior counselor Vyxmar got stuck in what was supposed to be a simple downward-facing dog position. "I fail to understand," Vyxmar had complained while 3 assistants helped untangle him, his scales flushing a brilliant shade of embarrassment. "How do humans find spiritual enlightenment while contorted like a malfunctioning maintenance drone?" The real chaos began when Richard Foster, a former Olympic gymnast turned diplomatic staff member, demonstrated his skills in the adaptation chamber. The Vaxarians' perception of human physical capabilities underwent a complete transformation. Their initial disgust at human facial features was replaced by awe at the potential for physical expression. "Their bodies defy conventional geometric logic," exclaimed first speaker Zwyxtal during an emergency council meeting. "They can reshape themselves through deliberate effort, creating perfect forms that even our most advanced genetic engineering hasn't achieved. How did we not see the beauty in this before?" The situation reached a new level of complexity when Vaxarian media outlets began requesting interviews with human athletes. The station's communication channels were flooded with questions about human exercise techniques, dietary practices, and the philosophy behind physical training. Ambassador Reed found himself dealing with an entirely unexpected diplomatic challenge when a group of young Vaxarian nobles began attempting to emulate human workout routines. The adaptation chamber had to be temporarily closed after an enthusiastic but ill-advised attempt to recreate Richard's gymnastics routine resulted in a tangle of disoriented Vaxarians with their scales in complete chromatic chaos. "We need to establish proper safety protocols," Olivia Martinez insisted during a staff meeting. "Yesterday, I found 3 Vaxarian diplomats attempting to bench press ceremonial artifacts because they'd run out of proper equipment." The cultural exchange team quickly realized they needed to develop a modified fitness program that would accommodate Vaxarian physiology. This led to the creation of the first interspecies exercise regime, dubbed Geometric Dynamics, a combination of human training principles adapted to work with Vaxarian physical capabilities. But perhaps the most surprising development came from the Vaxarian medical community. Their researchers discovered that certain human exercises could help their species maintain better scale alignment and joint flexibility. What had started as a diplomatic incident was evolving into a genuine cultural revolution. As the second week of the exchange program drew to a close, Ambassador Reed received an unusual request. The Vaxarian High Council wanted to establish a permanent human fitness advisory committee. They also suggested modifying their traditional diplomatic attire to better showcase physical development, a radical departure from their conventional protocols. "I never thought I'd say this," Reed confided to Sophia during their evening briefing, "but we might be looking at the first interstellar alliance built on bench presses and pull-ups." Sophia nodded, trying to maintain her professional composure despite the absurdity of the situation. "Just wait until they discover competitive sports, sir. Something tells me we haven't seen anything yet." She was right. The Vaxarians' growing obsession with human physical culture was about to transform both societies in ways nobody could have predicted, and the real challenges were only beginning. The Vaxarian Central Broadcasting Network's main channel had never seen such viewership numbers. On screen, Richard Foster was demonstrating a modified version of Tai Chi, his movements deliberately slowed to allow Vaxarian viewers to appreciate what they called the sacred geometry of human motion. Behind him, a group of Vaxarian students attempted to mirror his movements, their scales shifting through a rainbow of concentrated effort. The fitness revolution had begun, and no one was more surprised by its intensity than the human diplomatic team. What started as a cultural curiosity had exploded into a galaxy-wide phenomenon. Vaxarian society, traditionally rigid in both its physical and social structures, was experiencing unprecedented change. The younglings refused to attend traditional posture training, complained Elder HFY during an emergency council session. The ancient Vaxarian scales had dulled to a concerned gray. They say our methods are inefficient. They demand what they call functional movement classes instead. The traditional Vaxarian beauty standards, which had remained unchanged for millennia, were being challenged. Young Vaxarians began to value the flowing, dynamic movements inspired by human exercise over the static, geometric poses that had defined their species' aesthetic for generations. Lieutenant Sophia Williams found herself appointed as the head of an unprecedented initiative, the first interspecies physical education academy. Her first challenge was helping the Vaxarian architects design a facility that could accommodate both species' needs. No, the meditation chamber cannot be next to the weight room, she explained for the third time to the construction team. And yes, we need flexible flooring. Trust me, you'll thank me when you attempt your first burpee. The Academy's opening ceremony became an unexpected cultural flashpoint. Traditional Vaxarian elders watched in horror as their species' most promising youth demonstrated a fusion exercise routine that combined ancient Vaxarian dignity poses with human calisthenics. The result was either beautiful or blasphemous, depending on whom you asked. Professor Nexthar, who had emerged as a leading advocate for the cultural fusion, presented his revolutionary findings to the Science Council. Our research shows a 47% improvement in scale luminosity among Vaxarians who have adopted human exercise principles. Even more fascinating, we're seeing unprecedented neurological development in areas previously thought dormant in our species. The professor's presentation was interrupted by a group of conservative protesters, their scales locked in the traditional pattern of disapproval. They carried signs warning about the dangers of excessive physical malleability and the need to preserve geometric purity. But the revolution couldn't be stopped. Vaxarian fashion designers began creating workout attire that showcased muscular development while incorporating traditional scale patterns. Exercise spaces started appearing in every major Vaxarian city, each featuring carved quotations from both human fitness gurus and traditional Vaxarian philosophers. Ambassador Reed found himself mediating increasingly bizarre cultural disputes. No, he patiently explained to a group of enthusiastic Vaxarian fitness converts, humans don't actually gain spiritual enlightenment from protein shakes. That was a marketing slogan you misinterpreted. The situation reached a new level of complexity when Vaxarian scientists began developing exercise equipment specifically designed for their species' unique physiology. The ScaleFlex 3000 became the hottest consumer product in Vaxarian history, a device that promised to help achieve human-inspired muscle definition while maintaining proper geometric alignment. Even the conservatives couldn't deny the health benefits. Emergency medical treatments for scale rigidity decreased by 60% among Vaxarians who adopted the new fitness practices. The military reported improved performance metrics across all combat simulations. Perhaps, Elder HFY reluctantly admitted during a council meeting, his scales softening to a contemplative blue, there is wisdom in this human approach to physical development. After all, what is more geometrically perfect than a body in harmonious motion? The elder's words marked a turning point. The fitness revolution was no longer just a youth movement, it was becoming an integral part of Vaxarian culture. But as human influence continued to grow, no one realized they were about to face their biggest challenge yet. As Richard Foster completed his broadcast with the traditional Namaste gesture, which the Vaxarians had enthusiastically adopted while completely misunderstanding its cultural context, he received an urgent message from Earth's diplomatic office. The Vaxarian entertainment industry had a proposal that would either cement the alliance between their species or throw everything into chaos. The message that appeared on Ambassador Reed's desk terminal was unprecedented. The galaxy's largest Vaxarian entertainment conglomerate wanted to launch an interspecies modeling agency. Their target audience? The entire known universe. They want what? Lieutenant Sophia Williams asked, her usual composure cracking as she read the proposal. A reality holoshow called So You Think You Can Flex? The entertainment industry's sudden interest in human physique had created a diplomatic scramble. Overnight, Earth's athletes, personal trainers, and fitness models became the most sought-after celebrities in Vaxarian space. The conservative council members were horrified, but they couldn't deny the cultural tsunami approaching. Daniel Parker, a former military fitness instructor turned diplomatic staff member, became the inadvertent face of this phenomenon. His instructional holovids, originally created to help Vaxarians modify human exercises for their physiology, had gone viral across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Your geometric optimization techniques are most enlightening, gushed producer Twax Lin, her scales rippling with excitement during a media conference. We've never seen anyone combine aesthetic appeal with mathematical precision in such a captivating way. Daniel had simply been demonstrating proper push-up form. The situation escalated when Vaxarian fashion houses began hiring human models for their advertisements. Traditional Vaxarian clothing, designed to emphasize scale patterns and rigid posture, was being reimagined to highlight what they called dynamic symmetry. The results were either revolutionary or ridiculous, depending on your species. I don't understand, Richard Foster complained during a staff meeting. They want me to demonstrate advanced gymnastics moves while wearing ceremonial scale-inspired armor. How is that even possible? The answer came in the form of a hybrid fashion show that nearly caused an interstellar incident. Humans and Vaxarians performed choreographed routines that combined athletic demonstrations with traditional Vaxarian dignity poses. The show broke every viewing record in Vaxarian history and spawned a new genre they called physical geometry entertainment. Professor Nexthar, now heading the Department of Interspecies Aesthetic Studies, published a controversial paper titled The Mathematics of Movement: How Human Exercise Redefines Universal Beauty Standards. The academic community was scandalized, but the public was enthralled. Look at these metrics, Olivia Martinez reported during an emergency briefing. Vaxarian media consumption of human fitness content has increased by 3,000%. They're particularly obsessed with something they call the sacred art of crunches. The modeling phenomenon reached its peak when a Vaxarian fitness enthusiast named Zwax Nor created a workout routine that perfectly merged both species' approaches to physical movement. The routine, called geometric flow, became a sensation. Practitioners claimed it helped them achieve both human-style muscle definition and traditional Vaxarian scale alignment. However, success brought its own problems. Conservative groups warned about the aestheticization of foreign influence. They claimed that traditional Vaxarian beauty standards were being erased by what they dramatically called the human physical propaganda. The controversy came to a head during the first Interstellar Fitness Expo. As Daniel Parker prepared to demonstrate geometric flow alongside Zwax Nor, a group of traditional Vaxarian protesters stormed the stage, their scales locked in patterns of extreme disapproval. But what could have been a diplomatic disaster turned into a breakthrough moment. Daniel and Zwax Nor, instead of stopping their demonstration, incorporated the protesters' traditional dignity poses into their routine. The spontaneous fusion of old and new traditions created something entirely unexpected. Remarkable, Elder Kwexvar observed, watching the performance. They've achieved perfect geometric harmony while maintaining dynamic flexibility. Perhaps this is not the corruption of our values, but their evolution. As videos of the performance spread across the galaxy, something profound became clear. What had started as a modeling phenomenon had become a powerful symbol of cultural synthesis. But more importantly, it had opened the door to a deeper understanding between the species. Ambassador Reed, watching the aftermath unfold, received another urgent message. The Vaxarian High Council had made a decision that would transform their society forever, and humanity's role in the galaxy along with it. The message that appeared on Ambassador Reed's terminal was simple but revolutionary. The Vaxarian High Council had voted to establish the first interstellar institute of physical and cultural harmony. More surprisingly, they wanted it built on Earth. They want to send their young ones to train alongside humans, Olivia Martinez explained during the emergency staff meeting. Not just in exercise, but in all aspects of physical culture. They believe we have something fundamental to teach them about beauty and adaptation. The announcement came exactly 1 year after the infamous gym incident that had started it all. In that time, both species had undergone remarkable transformations in their understanding of beauty, strength, and cultural exchange. Professor Nexthar, now serving as the head of the new institute's research division, had made a groundbreaking discovery. The human capacity for physical adaptation isn't just about aesthetics, he explained to a mixed audience of humans and Vaxarians. It represents a fundamental truth about the nature of beauty itself: it's not static, but dynamic. Not fixed, but evolving. The professor's scales shifted through patterns of excitement as he displayed his findings. Vaxarians who had adopted human exercise principles weren't just developing new muscle definition, their scales were becoming more flexible, more iridescent, creating entirely new patterns that combined geometric precision with fluid movement. Lieutenant Sophia Williams, watching a group of young Vaxarians perform their morning exercises in the adaptation chamber, noticed something remarkable. They no longer showed any sign of their former disgust at human features. Instead, they studied their human instructors with genuine appreciation, seeing beauty in the very differences that had once repelled them. "Your faces," a young Vaxarian named Arwaxtel explained when she asked about the change, "we now understand they're like your bodies, always changing, always expressing, always adapting. There's mathematical beauty in that variability." The conservative opposition hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had evolved. Elder Kwyxvar, once the strongest voice against human influence, now led a movement to integrate traditional Vaxarian geometric principles with human dynamic movement patterns. "Our ancestors sought perfect forms through stillness," the elder declared during the institute's opening ceremony, his scales glowing with wisdom. "But these humans have shown us that perfection also exists in motion, in change, in the geometry of adaptation itself." Richard Foster, who had become something of a cultural icon among the Vaxarians, found himself teaching a class that combined traditional Vaxarian dignity poses with human yoga and martial arts. The resulting discipline, which they named adaptive geometry, became a symbol of the new relationship between the species. Daniel Parker's fitness programs had evolved too. Working with Vaxarian physiologists, he had developed training methods that enhanced the natural beauty of both species while respecting their unique biological characteristics. The programs were now standard training in both Earth and Vaxarian military academies. But perhaps the most profound change came in the everyday interactions between the species. In the Institute's common areas, humans and Vaxarians could be seen sharing meals, exchanging exercise tips, and engaging in passionate discussions about the nature of beauty and strength. "Look at them," Ambassador Reed said to Sophia, watching a group of human and Vaxarian students practicing adaptive geometry together. A year ago, they could barely look at each other. Now they're teaching each other about beauty. The Vaxarian media, which had once focused exclusively on geometric perfection, now celebrated diversity in all its forms. Their art began to incorporate principles of change and adaptation, creating new forms that were neither purely human nor purely Vaxarian, but something wonderfully unique. As the first year of the Institute drew to a close, the Vaxarian High Council made one final announcement that symbolized how far both species had come. They were updating their ancient definition of beauty in their official cultural documents. The new definition read, "Beauty is found not only in perfect forms, but in the perfect harmony of change and stability, in the geometry of growth, and in the endless expressions of life across the stars. Ambassador Reed, reading the announcement, couldn't help but smile. What had started with an awkward diplomatic meeting and a chance encounter in a gym had led to something truly revolutionary, two species learning to see beauty not despite their differences, but because of them. As he watched the sunset over the Institute's campus, where humans and Vaxarians moved through their evening exercises together, he realized they had discovered something far more valuable than just new beauty standards. They had found a way to see the beauty in evolution itself, both physical and cultural. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere out there, other species were watching, wondering what strange new forms of beauty they might discover when they finally met their neighbors among the stars.